with meaningful. Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Alignment Podcast. This program is all about providing leaders and managers with meaningful insights on how to optimize business results by aligning their people strategy to their business strategy. Our goal is to support you as you rise to the challenges of complex decision making centered around attracting and retaining top talent.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? My name is Jamie Pottinger, and I'd just like to welcome you to another Strategic Alignment podcast. And today I have with me none other than Shauna K. Pottinger, Strategic Alignment expert who deals with helping people in terms of placing them in the right fit when it comes onto the job market. And she has like the genie bottle in making sure that we have the best teams and the best leadership in achieving the results. But today we'll be talking about how do you optimize hiring in the post-COVID era. Some people may be saying we're still in the middle of COVID, but as you drive along the highway, you see a lot of signs. People are saying we're needing talent, we need people, we need people, we need people. And some folks are just saying that we cannot hold on to good talent. So Shauna, today you'll be sharing with us as we have a conversation about the hiring process and how you could still remain competitive, achieving all the results that you need to achieve, regardless of the pandemic and regardless of the fact that some folks don't have stimulus money in their pocket. And when you have money in your pocket, you feel as if you have just about everything. So Shauna, before I start hitting you with any questions, just share a little bit. What are your thoughts when you look at the job market and you look at some of the challenges that leaders are facing, managers are facing? What comes to your mind first before I even ask you the first official question?
It's interesting that you raised the point about the stimulus, because I do believe that some of the efforts that the government has made in terms of helping people to basically cope with what's going on in the economy. And because of COVID, people have lost their jobs, and so many factors that are affecting the dynamics in terms of people's livelihood. There are some real challenges that we're seeing on the horizon as it relates to labor shortages and so on. And I'm pretty sure that those organizations that will survive this tsunami, as you'd put it, they're going to have a very strategic and intentional approach around how they look to hire and all of that. But I'm sure we're going to get into those details a little later. So I don't want to delve too deep, but the truth is that the very same way that we see challenges among different people groups, people are afraid of venturing out there into the workplace, not necessarily so much because of the safety factors, as the research is showing, but just the very fact of feeling as if they're trading their time for money. And so, their employers do have a real challenge on their hands in terms of attracting the right type of talent into their organizations. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We did take a long break from this podcast, but I'm very happy to be here with you and be your first guest on this.
So thank you for that. And as you talk about talent and what's happening in the workforce, you being in the talent optimization space, I'm sure that you're seeing a lot of new emerging trends with companies who are seeking to hire and to retain top talent. What are some of the challenges that you are seeing on the ground, especially during this season? What are some of the challenges?
So very recently, our partners over there at Predictive Indexed, they completed a survey. And basically from the survey respondents, what they were able to see and the insights that they were able to glean from this research basically showed that approximately 57% of those who responded are actually looking at changing careers within the next 12 months, Jamie. And so there is what is being coined, I have this buzz phrase called the Great Resignation that is looming. And there are some employers who are actually experiencing it right now as we speak, or what they call the turnover tsunami, where there's a wave of people who are leaving in droves, either to other jobs, or some of them are just going out there to find their own their own thing and to do their own thing. And so employers are really challenged when it comes on to this particular issue. And then there's another factor that among employee groups, we're seeing a greater focus or focal point on people being more careful about their own mental health. And so there's a greater emphasis where people are trying to now preserve their mental health, so much so that people are willing to take salary cuts or reduced hours or just not move to some place where you're offering them probably double the amount they're making just because they want to preserve their mental health. And so that's another area that's challenging our employers these days, because they now have to come up with flexible and workable solutions to ensure that the type of offerings that or the job offers that they're making will find ways of appeasing and appealing to those who are basically going along that lines. And then there are others who are looking for more flexible terms. Jamie, there are some people who are done with the life of waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to commute 45 minutes to an hour to get to a job and then sit there from 9 to 5 after going through COVID and recognizing that the power of technology has basically dissolved the barriers related to work, home, balance, and all of those things. So the truth is, all entities that are looking to hire and retain top talent today, and they're faced with challenges as it relates to hiring, will have to come up with a very disciplined and formal approach when it comes on to their hiring process.
So let me ask you a question, Sean, and this is a spin-off to what you just made mention. When it comes on, are you saying that there is not enough people that we don't have enough persons in the job market for these leaders to fill in these positions, or it's just that people have changed, the mindset has shifted to the place whereby people are looking for a different work environment? People are looking for something that is more focused not just on what the company needs or the results that the company needs to drive them to where they need to get to, but they're really looking at what is in it for me. Is that what you're hearing? Is that what you think managers and leaders who are looking to attract the top talents should be focused on?
I think, when we have the discussion about shortages, most times that is around the whole idea of those people in the market that would serve as the best recruits, right? Some of the best talents. There is a shortage of that because most of the people who have the talent that could definitely allow people's organization to thrive, a lot of them are looking into other means and more flexible terms in terms of job offerings. And so in terms of the shortage, that's where the shift in the power dynamics has sat right now, in terms of the bargaining power is much stronger on the part of the employee who's looking to venture into the market, especially those employees who, most organizations, especially your Fortune 500, are looking to get into their company to make it better. And so I'd say it's a mixture of both, not to say that there are less people, but in terms of the talent pool, the strong talent pool that's needed to drive productivity, to drive innovation, and so on, employers are going to have to become a little bit more flexible around that because the power dynamics has shifted and these people are making demands in terms of what they're. And I give an example. Let's look at millennials. A lot of them are quite capable of doing the job, but they're not necessarily looking to do go the traditional route, in terms of taking on a position. Most times they're looking at things like, how is this role going to, appeal to a greater good? And if an organization is not able to articulate in a very clear and concise way, they're going to have challenges in terms of attracting these groups of people. And technically speaking, the baby boomers, they're retiring. And so there is definitely a need for a shift. There's definitely a need to be agile among different organizations in terms of the employment style. I know the healthcare industry is taking a hit right now, but they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and take a more formal, disciplined, and strategic approach when it comes on to how they formulate their hiring process.
So what I'm hearing then, Shauna, is that based on, with our leaders and our companies and the strategy that they have in terms of how they secure talent, those who have not chosen to make a shift in terms of doing that, they stand a chance of securing, not, I don't want to say bad talent, but bad hires. Because sometimes you may hire persons who they are qualified, they have the best resume, they have the best degree, they're from the best universities, but they're just not the right fit. So you end up having a round peg trying to fit that peg into a square hole.
I
So
love that.
my follow-up question to you where that is concerned then is that there's a saying that, one bad apple can spoil the entire bunch. Share with me, some of the implications of a bad hire. And the reason I'm saying this is that sometimes desperation forces you to do things that you'd not have normally done under normal circumstances. And as we're talking about how to optimize the hiring process in the post-COVID era. Now that we have the Delta variant, so we don't know if we're post or we're in the middle of it. But my question to you is that with the job market shifting, with the need that employees have, it's shifting. What are the implications that are there for leaders or for managers who end up making bad hires in terms of trying to achieve the results and trying to have a warm body in that seat?
Well, Jamie, I think across industries, you'll find that the answer to that question will differ. But I think one recurring theme that I've been seeing throughout, and as we work with our clients and we engage in, trying to help them to bring talent optimization to life in their organizations. There's some industries and certain lines of employees that really, to be honest with you, high turnover rates is the norm. But there are some that, when you have just one single bad hire can turn out to be a very costly mistake, especially when you're talking about executive level positions, because beyond the one very important factor in terms of the cost of, bringing an executive or moving an executive cross country to come and join your team, beyond that, because we know that that's really expensive in terms of people cost to move people, to hire people. Beyond that piece, because you're talking about getting a search firm and getting referrals and all of these things. But beyond that factor, right, we're not going to talk about dollars and cents now. Beyond that factor, the truth is, we've always talked about this, Jamie, where we say that just one person that you introduce into your team, if that person is toxic in their behavioral style, if they're toxic in terms of the way that they come across with other employees, two things can happen. It can change the culture of your organization. It can change the culture of your team. And probably it will change it not for the better, but for the worse. And in such cases, you want to see, or you want to have a very intentional and workable strategy around who am I bringing in? And how do I gain insights on this person before they even sit in the seat that I want them to sit in? So there has to be something intentional around that, because beyond the fact that they can change your culture, one of the other things that they can influence and impact is, good people leaving your organization. If you have a bad manager or a bad executive that comes to run your organization, I've seen it where, you have excellent workers who are delivering on key results to your organization, but they end up leaving because they just can't work with that person in the leadership role. And so the reason I said costly is that there's some things, financially that you will definitely have to deal with. And that's a very important factor. But beyond that, there's some things that you can't quantify into dollars and cents, but they really do have a profound impact on the overall organization.
So what you're saying then, Shauna, and we've seen this because we've worked with a number of teams and a number of execs. We recognize that the culture in the workforce is what really drives the results. And sometimes you may have people in the team, they may not be the strongest, but because of the positive energy that has been experienced in that area, and they're placed in their right fit, and they're working with people who understand what they're doing. And even if they don't understand what they're doing, the kind of energy that they bring to the team really create that winning team, that winning culture, that dream team approach, whereby people are not competing for position, but they're competing to make the team the best. And then they give that discretionary value that is needed to ensure that we all win. And as you said, that somebody was talking about Usain Bolt earlier, and they were talking about when they set that record with the relay team, and the fact
Mhm.
that they all did better when they worked together. And I think that's what's happening now. So I want to follow up with this question. I don't want to get too carried away with it, but you know when you talk about teams and hiring, Shauna, you made mention of the fact that you know leaders must change their approach in terms of how they strategize in securing and hiring and inspiring and motivating employees and ensuring that they have the right fit for the right position. So my question is that should managers and leaders only focus on degrees and years of service or zip code, or when it comes on to the things that they use in terms of securing top talent, should they only be focused on the conventional old approach when it comes on to filling staff and putting people into positions so that they can be in a winning space?
Jamie, that's a loaded question. It's a very good one too. In our last conversation, I remember we talked about the briefcase, right? Where we reference what you just talked about in terms of professional experience and educational background as just the briefcase, and that uh, traditionally, when we are hiring, we tend to overemphasize and put a lot of weight on the briefcase. But beyond the briefcase, a person shows up to the organization, not just with a briefcase, but they show up as an entire person, a whole person. They show up with a head. That means they have the ability to cognitively assimilate based on the knowledge that is coming their way, or new information that's coming their way that they have to learn in a very short period of time. But then also, there is the other aspect of it, and that has to do with behavior. And people underestimate the impact that behavior can have. And so, based on that last discussion, I won't delve too deeply into that, but there are more and more organizations that are taking greater steps towards achieving certain results. They're going beyond just the sales goal, they're going beyond the targets. They're also looking at a deeper level on how will this person look when they come into my team? Will they add value or will they take away based on their natural behavioral style? So you see
And
things
Shauna,
emerging.
before you go any further, Shauna, you talk about add value and take away value. And I had to pause you right there, because sometimes I think some leaders are so focused on the quick win, whereby they're not even considering the fact that the quick win may end up taking away value, because you may have a person who's in it for the sprint but not in the long haul. How do you deal with that? I would like for you to unpack that for me as you continue. I didn't want to miss that point as you made mention just right there. How do you deal with that?
I'm sorry, you broke up for a little bit there, Jamie. I missed out on some of
Yeah,
what you said.
so I was saying that sometimes some leaders or some managers, they're so focused on the quick win, they end up pulling people in the team that could only do the sprint and end up negatively impact the long-term
Mm.
benefits of the culture. I would like for you to unpack that with what you're talking about in the misfit, because sometimes a person may fit in for a given moment, a given season, and a given experience, but not necessarily for the longevity and the sustainable growth and effectiveness of the group or for the company.
That's an excellent point that you raised there, because Pat Lencioni, he has this concept that I was able to come across, and I think it is just so profound, and I think it will fit perfectly into what you're saying. There are many organizations that are driven to produce smart organization, and what do I mean by that? A smart organization is only driven by the results and performance. That's all they're catering to. And so you'll find that even if their turnover rate is high and they're paying, they're bleeding, they're hemorrhaging when it comes on to their spending on hiring people, that they're more focused on the end goal. Am I hitting those sales targets? Am I able to hit those that important goal at the end of the month in terms of my revenue? And once they're able to do that, they're okay. But then there are other organizations, and these are the organizations that are thriving currently, even in the face of COVID-19, because they're not just focused on being smart, but they're also focused on being healthy. They're focused on carving and creating a culture that will ensure that those who show up each day, they look forward to doing so. and they look forward to having that shared goal, and achieving that shared goal on behalf of that organization, because you would have now secured that psychological commitment. And that's not very easy to achieve, but it's something that we should look to work towards. And so having an expanded focus beyond the bottom line, beyond the sales goal, beyond the target revenue, having an expanded focus to look at how happy are my employees in their roles. Do they feel fulfilled? Are they well in terms of their mental capacity and their mental health? Those are things that organizations are now being forced to look at. And the ones that will survive COVID-19, Jamie, you heard it here first. The one that will successfully not just survive but thrive after COVID-19 are the ones that are looking to do both, making sure that the organization is as smart as it is healthy.
So what I'm hearing then, Shauna, is that regardless of how driven you are as a leader, as an organization, you have to also focus on your cultivating strategies, whereby you're investing in your people. Your people,
Yes.
even though you have your business results and your goals and stuff like that, you need people to realize those goals. And if you don't invest in your people, placing them in the right position, then in the long run, you'll have a carriage without a horse or anybody to push it along or to drive it along. And you find that a number of companies, they find themselves just as they're at the peak of their performance, their wheels and everything just find a way to leave them because people are not satisfied. They may be paid a lot, but in terms of satisfaction and fulfillment, is not there. And I think every company really need people who are loyal, people who are willing to give discretionary value, as opposed to just working for the dollars and cents, because at some point they will jump that ship. And that brings me to the next question, Shauna, because regardless of the systems that leaders have in place or organizations.
I didn't quite finish with that last question, because we talked about emotional intelligence and some of those emerging factors that are influencing impacting hiring that managers and leaders should focus on. But there's another big one that I don't want us to miss in terms of the hiring, because right now there's a lot of conversation and buzz surrounding DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's another important factor that organizations have to consider as they go through the hiring process, beyond the employee experiences, beyond the educational background. Organizations have to also have a very intentional strategy around how they create diverse teams, because that's also a reflection of the wider society. Millennials and all of these groups are looking to work for organizations that will champion that cause. And it's not necessarily something that we want to, and Jamie, probably later on in another episode, we can touch on this and delve into it a little deeper. But there are some organizations now that are talking the talk, but they're not necessarily walking the walk. And all it takes is for people to come there, work for you, and they realize that you're not diverse. And let me tell you something, there is simply nothing worse than to have bad referrals in terms of the testimonial of an employee who worked for your organization and they are just trashing your company to others, instead of offering great referrals to say this is a nice place to work. Nothing works against your organization than those types of scenarios. And so that diversity, equity, and inclusion is another major factor that leaders, managers, people who are in HR have to be able to focus on as they are contemplating the whole process of optimizing their hiring process.
And as you said that, Shauna, it goes right back, as we said earlier, cultivating, focusing on people. And if you focus on people, then people will give you the results and take you beyond where you started with them. And as we said earlier, that systems, organizations, leaders may have the best approach in terms of hiring, but there are times when we will miss a few. And sometimes if you don't have a system in place, you'll have misfits. Now, we only have maybe 6 or 7 minutes left in this interview, but how do you deal with the misfits that you have? What do you do with people who are misfits? They are talented, they are creative, they're unique in what they do, but you went wrong as an employer, as an HR person in terms of securing talent, and you now have Jamie Pottinger at your front desk, at your board meeting, making decisions, and you recognize that Jamie is a misfit. what do you do? Do you kick Jamie to the curb, or you allow him to stay in that position while the business just go awry and everything goes, and when it's finally finished, you said, great job, Jamie? How do you deal with the misfits if you find yourself in that position as a leader, as a manager, running a corporation or any entity?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of organizations are currently dealing with that. I'd say hire Pottinger and Associates Consulting.
I second it. I second it.
Yeah. The whole question and matter of misfit, the only way you can determine misfit is that you will be able to see certain symptoms coming out or coming through. There is heightened levels of frustration with the worker or the employee. They're complaining about the job. They're either complaining about the relationship, they're complaining about the culture or the team. All of those factors will lead to an employee being actively disengaged and practicing what is now coined as presenteeism, Jimmy, where they show up at work and they do absolutely nothing to drive productivity. They're doing the bare minimum. If you find yourself in a situation where you see that frustration levels are heightened among your employee groups, it is best what the gaps are. I'm sorry?
It seems as if we lost you for a minute. If you mind repeating just now.
Okay. So if you find yourself as an employer with misfits, it simply means that this person is likely going to leave the organization soon, because they're at a point where they are not necessarily engaged. They don't feel like, they are producing at the highest level. And so in order for you to address that, you have to come up with a very objective way to identify where the gaps are. Could it be the job? Is there misalignment with the job? Is there misalignment with the culture? What are the factors that are driving the misalignment? And the only way for you to be able to uncover this is by using an objective source to effectively either assess. They have different tools that you can use. We have some here at Pottinger and Associates Consulting. My favorite is a design tool that basically gives you a very aerial view or a picture of how your team members are fitting into the overall strategy that the organization is pursuing. And so I really and truly believe that there are tools out there, engaging organizations that are in the space to help you identify those things. Then you are able to do so. But some of the symptoms that you need to look out for is a lack of engagement and heightened frustration among your employees.
So Shauna, as we're wrapping up, if we could just wrap this last part in the next 3.5 minutes. And the question is, if you could tell us about some steps that involve in effectively optimizing the hiring process. I know you just started, but if you could just wrap that in a nutshell, what are some of the steps that managers need to take in terms of effectively optimizing, getting the best out of the hiring process so they have the best talent, and not just the best talent, but in the right position?
Yeah, and Jamie, right now, a lot of organizations are faced with the challenge of scaling their operations. Some of them had to let go people that were serving them well, but now they have to let them go. And so we believe that in order for them to bounce back and to be able to fully optimize the process to create a system whereby they're able to attract and retain the best, the first thing that they have to do is to articulate, because everything, we always talk about this, everything comes down to the strategy. They have to develop and articulate a very intentional strategy around people. What kind of people will help us to achieve the specific strategy that we're seeking to obtain? And once you would have been able to do that, you make sure that you created the system and the process to support that strategy. And what does that look like? It looks like clearly defining what the roles are. So for instance, at Pottinger and Associates Consulting, we say that before you put a job announcement out there, you need at least 3 people seated around that table to help you to determine what that job announcement should look like. Sometimes I go through Indeed, sometimes I go on different job boards and I look at some of the organizations that are putting different job announcements out there. And I say to myself, unless they're trying to get some kind of a cookie cutter approach in terms of who they're hiring, don't just go online and look up a job description and then just copy and paste. I say Be very intentional about what are the specific things that you want this person to do. How do you want them to perform cognitively or respond cognitively to the work that you are producing? Because that has to do with how fast can they assimilate and interpret information and knowledge that's coming their way. Behaviorally, what are the behavioral expectations and requirements for the position? Are there behavioral requirements? Those need to be stated explicitly. And so we strongly recommend that you engage the stakeholders who will be working with that role. It could be someone who has formerly worked in the position. They can tell you exactly what needs to be done to get the job done. You want to engage also the hiring manager, because this is the person who will be holding this person accountable. And then the human resource expert can then sit with that group and sort of bring it all together in terms of the framing out and the structure of that job announcement. I think a lot of organizations lose from the moment they put their job announcements out there. It's not as detailed. It does not provide the kind of details that that would make a very brilliant person be attracted to your organization. And so I believe that all of that is centered around a hiring brand. Mike Zani refers to this in his book about building dream teams. And I believe that once you're able to do those things, then you're able to put the right job announcement, attract the right person. The other thing that we strongly recommend is the use of assessments, behavioral assessments. You have the Myers-Briggs, you have the predictive index behavioral assessment. Those are strong tools. We also offer those here at Pottinger and Associates Consulting. And then also you can use the cognitive assessment to measure whether or not this person will be able to adapt and fulfill the knowledge requirements of the job. Those are assessments that can work on that as well.
So
Now,
as you, third part, you know what? Go ahead and wrap that point up, and then I ask the last question.
Yeah. Now, once you would have been able to do the behavioral assessment, then you can use interview guides and other important elements and tools that will address the specific gaps that you're able to see in a person's behavior or cognitive abilities when it comes on to what's required. So you have what's required here, and if the person is falling here, where are the gaps? You're able to identify those, and if there are other factors that would contribute to you hiring this person, then you are able to have some kind of a coaching or someone that will help to develop that person so that they can grow in the role. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, it's a very comprehensive approach that you're taking when it comes on to developing a very strong hiring and optimizing that hiring process.
So Shauna, as we're wrapping it up here, you know that we work with a number of clients here at Pottinger and Associates in terms of getting the right people on board, not just getting the right people on board, but supporting them when they don't have the right people, or the misfit, as we would say, and giving them the steps that allow them to get the best out of those who they have, and investing in their team through cultivating strategies while hitting the mark and hitting the results. Because many times people think that if you invest in people through cultivating strategies, you'll be missing out on the results that you need. And the other way is true, whereby if you invest in people, your results will keep increasing to a point whereby naturally will happen, because people would be would have bought into the idea in terms of what you're doing. So Shauna, how do we here at Pottinger and Associates help clients to optimize the hiring process? And you only have 2.5 minutes to answer the question, so we're gonna put a wrap on this one in terms of answering it. But how do we at Pottinger and Associates here help clients and help companies, organizations, and leaders in terms of their hiring process? And how do we help them when they would have gone along the wrong path but need to salvage their way back home? How do we help them here?
Yeah, so I'm basically going to sum it up in three points. The first thing that we do is that we equip them. We provide them with, we expose them to the tool. We have a range of tools. We expose them to the tools. We have them sign on to that. Once they're able to get the tool, then we provide them with knowledge transfer. And that has to do with training them on how to use the tool and how to interpret results and so on and so forth. We have workshops, seminars, different training sessions that we do one-on-one and so on in terms of that knowledge transfer piece. We provide them with resources that they can use to help them to better interpret and analyze the different responses that they would have gotten. But then there's also a final one, and that has to do with support. And I think that this is the strongest one, Jamie, because this is where we serve as a resource in ensuring that as they seek to implement this hiring system into their organization, that they're now able to do so on an ongoing basis and a consistent basis. We give them the steps in terms of implementation and also how to make sure that they're getting the best return on their investment. And this we offer through retainership and so on.
Thank you very much, Shauna, for sharing. That was a buckets and buckets load of nuggets in terms of when it comes down to hiring. And for organization, as we said, as we started, how do you optimize your hiring process in post-COVID and with the Delta variant? I don't know if we're post-COVID or in the middle of it or where we're heading, but we're saying that regardless of what is happening around you, regardless of what's happening in the job market, you can still perform at the top level if you ensure that the persons who you have working with you are in the right position.
Yes.
If you invest in strategies and systems that give them the feel that, guess what, I'm in the right spot and I'm doing what I enjoy doing, people will do that. But you have to also show them exactly what is in it for them. So thank you guys very much again for joining us on another Strategic Alignment podcast. And for the next 5 or 6 episodes, you'll be having Shauna will be joining me as a co-host. Or she may be
I love it.
Or I may be asking the questions, but it's all about giving you the tips, the tools, and the tricks to take you through tough periods and also to give you an opportunity to make the best use of the talent that you have while achieving the results that you have and experiencing the best dreams ever. So thank you guys very much again for joining us, and looking forward to you guys joining us again for another Strategic Alignment podcast where we say inspiring growth while sustaining
excellence.
So please visit us on our YouTube page. That's Pottinger and Associates Consulting, or you could check us out on LinkedIn. That's Jamie Pottinger, or you could find us on the gram. That's Jamie Pottinger again, or Shauna K. Pottinger. Please look out for us, and we always have something special, not just for you. Don't be selfish, but also for your team. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Strategic Alignment Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to our podcast by visiting our website at www.pottingerandassociatesconsulting.com.